Hello, and thank you for joining me again today for our very second live promo broadcast on all sorts of different social media platforms and YouTube as well. So thank you for joining me. Today is Geezers of Gear episode number 232. At least it's the promo for 232, which will launch next week on Thursday, March 28th. And today's podcast is brought to you by a new sponsor, Ultimate Support Systems. For over 45 years, Ultimate Support Systems has provided musicians with unique support solutions that are crafted with unparalleled innovation and quality. Ultimate Support has always been determined to invent, design, and manufacture the smartest support solutions and music accessories in the music industry. And that commitment to innovation continues to this day. Be sure to visit ultimatesupport.com, where you can learn all about their solutions for content creators, touring musicians, recording studios, and more. From acoustic treatment to best-in-class speaker stands, Ultimate Support has premium accessories you can count on. And I will add that my new microphone boom arm right here is brought to you by Ultimate Support Systems, by far the best microphone boom arm I have had for my podcast. This episode is also brought to you today by GearSource. GearSource was founded in 2002 with a mission to help global live events businesses move gear around the planet. Since that time, the company has transacted in more than 100 countries and has sold $250 million in sound, lighting, staging, and video gear. GearSource recently completely evolved its platform for massive global growth, enabling 14 different localized currencies, payments held in escrow to protect buyers and sellers, AI-powered logistics behind a new global logistics brand, GearMoves, and so much more. Visit GearSource.com today and expand your access to global markets for your gear and global gear for your markets. Yes. So episode number 232. But first, back to talking about ProLights. So this week, ProLights and Sound is going on in Frankfurt, Germany. Certainly one of the best shows in the past. It's questionable as to whether or not it'll be the best show in the future because it seems to be shrinking quickly. Sadly, because it used to be probably the biggest sound, lighting, video, staging show in the world. It used to be partnered with Music Messe. It used to be massive, 9 or 10 halls, I think. And it just seems to be shrinking. So we'll see what happens to the future of ProLights. Maybe I'll get somebody on from that show and they can tell me what they're doing, what they're planning, etc. So if anyone knows anyone who's involved in the planning and organization of ProLights, please have them contact producer@geezersofgear.com, and Sarah will get us set up for a chat and we can talk about what's going on with the show, what you're doing to protect the future of the show, how it's going to grow, etc. So at that show, lots and lots of new products have been announced. We talked about a few of them yesterday, but also I was reading about the Evo D7. Evo lights, of course, recently purchased by Robe, and that is ramping up not only their product development, but their manufacturing capabilities as well. And I think we're going to see a lot of really great things coming out of Evo. It's going to take them some time and effort and energy and people and talent and everything else to catch up to MA on the top end of the market. But I think that middle and lower end of the market, even the top end, but I think the middle and lower end, certainly MA, have not expanded to a point where you've completely blocked competitors, and that's allowed really great companies like Obsidian and others, Camsys, and certainly Avolites, who is kind of the originator of the rock and roll lighting desk. So we'll see where it goes. Obviously, their D9 is their flagship console. Their big, call it the Grand MA of the Avo line. It's been making some noise, but I would say it hasn't taken over the market by any stretch. We'll see what happens again under the Roby banner. It's a much more powerful console than it used to be, just from a standpoint of global distribution, global strength, resources, etc. But now they introduced the D7, which I saw in a social media post somewhere. Someone commented that the D7 is a D9 that you can check as baggage. And so it's a very good point. It's basically a mini-me of the D9, which call it the MA3 Micro or whatever, similar to that console, I guess. But I expect to see big things from that. Maybe a D7 will give them more of an intro into the large scale market, the bigger end of the market, and we'll see. Again, maybe if someone from Avo, I used to talk with Steve Warren all the time, but I don't know anyone else at Avo. If anyone wants to come on and talk about, the roadmap, where it's going, how the brand has changed, how the company's changed, feel free. Again, reach out to producer@geezesofgear.com. And one of my favorite brands, I have a bunch, but this is one of them, Ayrton. And so I am afraid to even pronounce the name of this new product, but Kyalami. And so it looks like a magic dot. It seems to act a lot like a magic dot, but it has a laser light source in it, and it's IP65. They're calling this part of an extreme miniaturization line of product. And supposedly it does a lot of really cool stuff. Lots of effects packed into a very, very small package with a really bright and intense light source, which is a laser. And so that's exciting. Seeing Ayrton miniaturize a laser sourced fixture is really exciting. I think that's a sign of great things to come, not only from Ayrton, but other manufacturers as well. I know a lot of people are playing with lasers right now, and we'll see where that goes. And of course, if the US would ever get our shit together and get the laser lighting fixtures out of the hands of the Food and Drug Administration from a standpoint of it just doesn't make any sense. What do they know about laser lighting and its impact on your eyes and stuff like that? Like, otherwise, they'd get rid of Sharpies and a lot of other beam effects that are probably much more dangerous than some of these lasers. So anyways, we'll see where that goes. I know a lot of companies are certainly lobbying for changes, but we'll see where that goes. Also from Ayrton is a Nando wash, and neat name. I don't know much about it. I cannot tell you what differentiates the Nando wash from all of the other LED wash lights that Ayrton has come out with recently. And maybe I'll talk to Ayrton about that and get more information, but I don't really know what differentiates this one other than it's IP65, but they've got other IP65 LED wash lights. So we'll see. We'll have to come back to that one. Looks cool. And lots and lots of IP rated stuff. One that was a little confusing, GLP announced a bunch of fixtures that have IP in the name, but I couldn't see any IP in the specs. So I would assume that IP in the name, like there was a bunch of them, and there's an impression something or other IP, and just a bunch of GLP fixtures that have IP in the name. And so I assume that that's an IP range. They're weatherproof, but it didn't list that in the specs, or at least from the posts that I was able to see. So moving on to episode number 232, Thomas, and I'm not sure if he pronounces it Kubik or Kubik, but Thomas Kubik, I'm going to call him. And so today's guest was introduced to me by Sarah, our producer, who, I don't know if people know this, but Sarah used to tour. And that was sort of how I got introduced to Sarah to begin with. She was touring, I think, mostly in hospitality and catering. And Sarah met this gentleman, Thomas, on tour where he was working with InFlames, and it was a Five-Finger Death Punch and InFlames tour. InFlames is a very heavy metal band, and so they met, hit it off, got to be friends or whatever. And Sarah thought, hey, he'd be a great guest. But it's funny because Sarah thought he was the manager for InFlames because he did so many different jobs with them, as you'll hear in his bio coming up here in a second. And lo and behold, finds out he's the sound engineer. So Thomas started his career 28 years ago, took the classic course from stagehand to behind the console and touring. He has been touring since 1999 with Euro and metal bands, including InFlames, Nevermore, Arch Enemy, Fear Factory, Angra, Lacuna Coil, Moonspell, Chimaira, and Willie Nelson's Luck Reunion in Austin. One of those just doesn't fit in, does it? Thomas has been extremely lucky to travel to pretty much every continent. Thomas has been with InFlames for 25 years in June as their sound engineer and tour manager, or in Thomas's words, the babysitter. Thomas loves coffee, wine, and champagne, and generally good food. We'll be finding out a lot more about Thomas's career, talking gear, what he's been up to recently, and what he has in store for this year. So please welcome Thomas Kubik. And for those of you who are viewing this live, I'll see you next week.
InFlames and Five Finger Death Punch, and I was like kind of like, oh my god, like this is going to be insane. And like, you know, like I'd never like worked with, you know, metal like that. And then I got there and everybody was as soft as anything.
That's usually how it is.
They didn't scare you like you thought metal people would scare you?
Yeah, and literally it was like, I mean, okay.
Did you think they sacrificed babies and burned crosses? And what did you think?
I don't know. I just thought it was going to be like really crazy. But I remember the very first, I think the first couple of days, because of Five Finger, they were like Alcoholics Anonymous, weren't they? So it was like
some of them,
no alcohol was allowed. And it was your camp that was like, no way, just because you've got a problem, we haven't. Yeah. And then that all changed.
So they were drinking vodka out of sippy cups and stuff.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah, that's funny.
Anyway, it was great. So enjoy the show, guys.
Sarah, any other stories you'd like to share while we're recording here?
No, I don't think so. Now you've put me on the spot.
Yeah.
The only thing I always remember is coming back into the dressing room when everyone has finished, and Thomas would always have a bottle of champagne. Nothing else, always champagne.
Again, very unmetal.
Seriously.
Yeah.
There we are. It's not wine, it's champagne.
It's very unmetal. I mean, unless you're drinking it out of the bottle.
No.
I only do that on very few occasions.
Yeah, only when you've run out of glasses. Yeah. All right, Sarah, you're out.
Yeah,
bye.
bye.
We have to get serious now. We can't have you sitting there yapping at us the whole time. So that was an interesting start to the podcast. I hit record while Sarah was blabbing, and I need to do that more often because occasionally she says something brilliant. So Thomas, welcome. So do you pronounce your last name Kubik or Kubik? I would guess Kubik sounds more German to me.
That's yeah. Although it's not German, I think it's Czech or whatever.
Oh, okay.
Originally, yeah.
Sounds like there's a story there.
But that's the right
Kubik.
pronunciation. So
forevermore it will be Kubik, and I think I said it right in the intro, anyways. So that's good. So. You know, it's nice that we had Sarah here to kind of greet you on because Sarah, you're the first guest I think that she brought from her camp of people that she met on the road and just thought were really cool people, and so she was pretty excited to get you on. So
fantastic.
So thanks for taking the time.
I had no idea that she's doing that now. It was like out of the blue, basically. So
well, on Crete, there's not so many jobs. I mean, basically, you could collect plastic off the beaches. You could make kebabs, or you could, be a producer for a podcast in Florida.
Yeah, sure. Why not?
Just not many opportunities, and so she tripped over this one. No, I was introduced from a friend. You probably don't know Gordon, but I was introduced by Gordon, who works with Production Park, and knew Sarah from there. And
Okay.
yeah, we hit it off, and next thing you know, she became. It's funny because I actually put a notice on my Facebook or something saying, "Hey, anybody want a part-time easy gig being a producer for a podcast?" And she was like, "I do." Pick
Yeah,
me.
yeah, yeah.
Would you even
Excellent.
consider me? And I said, "You're hired." I mean, not only would I consider you, it's over. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Excellent. Excellent.
So she says she met you, and we'll just continue down this story on a tour that was Five Finger Death Punch and InFlames, and she
Yeah.
mentioned earlier on this recording that Five Finger Death Punch were, I guess, in recovery, right? So they had,
I get parts of it, or parts of them, definitely,
yeah,
definitely were. Yeah, we didn't really get too much into the
the story,
detail of that
yeah.
either, because usually it's just like, okay,
Those are
whatever.
those are always interesting situations, though. I remember like Aerosmith earlier in their career, when I think when they first decided to get sober and then fell off and then fell back on and then fell off again. But
Yeah,
when
yeah,
they
yeah,
first
yeah,
did, they were really religious about it. Like you couldn't have alcohol or drugs or anything within,
yeah, yeah.
miles of the arena.
No, I mean, we usually, I mean, claims being based in Sweden,
Yeah,
and Scandinavian people are, they like
drinkers.
to drink.
Yeah, they're drinkers.
So it was very surprising on day one that all of a sudden, somebody came up and was like, "Oh, you can't do it." What do you mean we can't? This is not going to work,
Yeah,
because it's like
yeah.
that just
Well, it's
ruins
just
the mood
part of
for
their daily
everything.
ritual, right? Like it's just what they do,
Exactly.
It's
Yeah,
nothing
yeah, yeah.
bad, you know?
I mean, if it would have been communicated in advance or
Yeah.
whatever, it would have been a different story, I guess. But
Did that
it would
cause
still have been a no. But at least,
Yeah.
like, we would have been prepared somehow that
Yeah,
there's something going on,
I get it.
because this was definitely not the first tour where something like this was going on. Like, I
Yeah.
remember back in 2003 or 2004 when we did Ozfest. I mean, there was a daily AA meeting in catering for, like, I don't know
Yeah.
how many. It was like 200-300 people touring, and at, I don't know,
Half of them were
before
in the meeting.
before lunch service or whatever, they had this AA meeting in
Yeah.
there. So it's not an uncommon
Well,
thing per
let's
se.
face it, especially drugs and also, of course, alcohol have been a problem in our industry's past. And
Absolutely.
so it's a good thing that people who needed help have gotten help. People who needed to stop have stopped. Like I see that you're enjoying a glass of wine. To me, at my age now, that's pretty much the extent of my drinking. And a heavy night, I might have 3 glasses of wine, and then it's like, oh,
Yeah.
forget it. I'm going to have a hangover if I even touch
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
drop
Yeah.
more. But it used to
It
be,
doesn't get any
3
easier
bottles of
with the
wine.
age.
No, no. But it's a good thing. I mean, it's a good thing. I mean, if I didn't get hangovers or headaches, or if it didn't bother me in some way, I'd probably drink a whole lot more, because I do enjoy it. But
Yeah.
it's just I don't know, the sexiness of getting, drunk to a point where you pass out, on the floor somewhere where you don't even know where you are. That's just not as
Yeah.
attractive as it once was.
Not no exactly, yeah, not
Yeah.
necessarily attractive. Yeah.
So I wonder if
True.
because you're in that metal scene, and do you do any like German bands? Like I know that metal in Germany is a big thing still.
Um, German metal bands. Have I worked for German
Well, the
metal
only
bands?
reason I ask,
I'm sure there was.
I have a very good friend who I kind of grew up with in Canada, who's a drummer, and it was funny because
Oh,
Randy Black.
Randy Black. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Of course, I know Randy.
Oh, do you? So you
Yeah,
have to
yeah,
tell Randy that you were on my podcast, because we go back, literally 40 years, him and I. And so of course, like I don't know if you know this, but before he played in Annihilator, he played in Canada's most popular Rush tribute band, and it was a band called Click. And I was
I never heard of that.
I was very good friends with all of them, but Randy and I were we got in some trouble together, let's just say. And I owned at the time a music store, and I did business with them, and they were a client, but they also became very good friends. And the singer and keyboard player, Keith, I'm very good friends with still today, and Randy I talk to quite often. But yeah, before Annihilator, he was a very technical drummer in a Rush tribute band. And then all of a sudden he's in Annihilator playing this crazy metal music, and then he goes on with, all these other bands and ends up with Primal Fear and Destruction, and so
Primal Fear, that was the last ones that I know, I think, where he played. I met him when he was in Annihilator, because I toured with, that must have been early 2000s as well. I toured with Nevermore.
Okay.
And they did a European tour together with Annihilator. Okay. And I was on that, and that's where I met him.
Yeah.
And Crazy Jeff Waters, and it was an interesting tour.
He's in Destruction now and still going strong, touring constantly with them and doing all the festivals in the summer and stuff, of course. But so it's funny. I gotta ask, because to me, like, there are two really challenging jobs, I think, in that type of music, and one is being the drummer, and the other is being the sound engineer. Because to me, it's just this wall of coming at you, and you have to somehow separate all of those sounds and sort of create nuance among mayhem. Call it.
Well, it's not a wall of noise with all the bands. There is good ones and really good ones and not so good ones, just like everywhere else as well.
Yeah.
And it's definitely more challenging with like when it's just a bunch of noise, or the musicians come with certain ideas on how it should sound that work in a rehearsal space situation, but will never work in a club, or let alone arena or something like that.
Yeah.
But I mean, I was always pretty lucky, I would say, like mostly that the bands that I worked with either were very young when I started, so it wasn't this older guy is trying to tell us what to do. It was always like a experimenting on the same kind of level.
Yeah, they looked at you as a peer, not as somebody trying to straighten them out.
And then once I was in the business for like quite some time and started to work for other people or whatever, I already had a lot of experience for my age, because I literally started when I was like 18, 19, basically.
Really?
Like with the whole stagehand situation, even earlier than that. So were you a musician or something, and then you just... I wouldn't call myself a musician.
Yeah.
I did play guitar in a band, but I wouldn't.
You weren't very good.
I wouldn't go as far as saying I'm a musician. No.
But what got you interested in working behind the scenes, like in becoming a stagehand to start, and then moving your way up?
It was the playing with my band at the time, and it was like pretty obvious very quickly to me that, obviously you have to have a little bit of knowledge of all this so you can communicate with like locals.
Yeah.
And even back then, we wanted to have a good result for what we were doing. And then, that's how I basically got to know the people at the local club, and then, one thing led to another, and it's very typical.
Yeah. No, I mean,
it's typical career path, I would think. At least back then it was.
Yeah, it was. Now it's getting much more where you decide really early on that you want to work in the arts, and you go to school and you go to some sort of theater technology classes or something, and you're either in lighting or you're in sound or you're in set design or you're in costumes or whatever, wardrobe. And so now they're like, a lot of the younger people who I have on the podcast have taken a much more planned route into this industry. Whereas, you know,
like
you and beyond you, it was much more lucky. Yeah.
I think I was one of the last ones, or like my generation, so to speak, is one of the last ones that like got into this somehow, because at the time when I started doing this, the schools really didn't exist to do anything of this like this. You know, I mean, you could go in Austria, you could go to like university and you know, get this master's degree, but it was all very technical as well. It was less of a just like try and error type of,
you were taking like
thing
acoustical
where you could
engineering,
be creative or whatever. Exactly.
Acoustical engineering, not how to be the front of house guy for a metal band. You know,
Exactly.
101.
Well, that wasn't really my plan either, but you know, that's just how it happened.
I want to ask you about that. Like, you know, because you seem to have become typecast, sort of, you know, like how Jim Carrey can only do funny movies. When he does a serious movie, it's ridiculous, you know.
Which is a lie, though. I think he's very good when he does it. When he does a serious movie.
Well, maybe I chose a bad example, you know. But when it's somebody who's only in scary movies or only in funny movies or whatever, it's hard to imagine them. Like, do you watch Larry David, Curb Your Enthusiasm? It's one of my favorite shows ever.
Yes.
Could you imagine him in a serious role?
No, absolutely.
Exactly. You know, so I have a hard time imagining you working with Willie Nelson. You know? So to me, it's similar, you know, like you become known for a particular genre or whatever. And
I think this is mainly down to like your network. So to speak. If you don't work for one of the like big rental companies or whatever, you know, it's usually how it goes. And then for me, it's a little bit special, so to speak, as well, because I've been with InFlames for so long. And now I started as just the sound guy, then it turned into the sound guy tour manager thing. Then when it got bigger, we got a separate tour manager again, which I really liked. And then for various reasons, he got basically out very short before another tour was coming, or in between two tours, actually. And then that was, I think, in 2015. And they asked me again if I could do it, so we just don't have a stranger on the bus on the next run. And I wasn't really getting into it again because I wasn't really keen on the job, but it worked out really well, to everybody's surprise, I would say. And then we just kept doing it. But, you know, originally I was stick to just the sound. And if I would have done that, I would have a lot more time to do other things as well. And then I would probably try to get out of the metal a little bit more. But since InFlames basically kept me busy for 25 years now, there's very few months or weeks where I can actually decide to do something else.
It's not like you can book 3 other tours or something
really busy. You know? Which, I mean, on one hand, it's super nice because it's a very you know, family type of environment. Like I obviously know all their wives and kids and even parents and whatnot.
That's cool.
Which is really nice. And a lot of the crew within Flames has been around for 10 plus years. So it's like, you know, it's basically like a
family,
group of
a road family
being on the bus, which has its advantages, but obviously, like all families, there's difficulties.
Families have good and bad parts for sure. Families have good and bad parts. No, that's really cool. And you know, again, I'm not saying that it's bad to get stuck in metal or anything like that, because obviously, you know, you've done well, it's done well for you, they've done well with you, etc. But it's just it's an interesting observation, and I would guess, again, going back to the genre, like I would guess that there are some skills or whatever that are required that are different than doing sound for a pop act, or
I don't know. I
no.
I I I don't really I don't really
I
look
see
at it
looking
like
at the
that.
console and everything's clipping all the time. Like I just see red lights flashing everywhere in my
Well,
mind, right?
yeah,
So,
yeah. Well, yeah. That's there's definitely people out there that where it
yeah.
looks like that,
Yeah.
but it shouldn't look like that.
Vocals, you know, one minute a guy's going ah la la la, and then it's like
Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, sure.
yeah.
But I mean, you have that in other genres. You have just
Yeah.
have different challenges,
True.
but
Yeah.
in the end, it's all the same.
Yeah. Yeah.
To me, it is. It's like I would. I actually think if you get hired by somebody who's completely you're not a fan of the music, you have nothing. You would not listen to this at home. I actually think you go into this with a completely different mindset, so to speak.
Yeah.
And it's to me this is more objective than being a fan of the band that's on
Yeah.
stage.
So
So it's like
are you a fan of the
uh,
genre?
I used to like
Yeah.
I would like before or at the beginning when I got into it, I would listen to that type of not necessarily like InFlames, which they come out of like a death metal whatever
Yeah.
thing. That was never really my thing. But like metal in general, I would listen. Or back in those days, it was like the hardcore days, like
Yeah.
Biohazard and
Yeah.
all these kind of
Yeah.
things. I would listen to that. But nowadays, I mean, I'm happy if there's no music,
Ah,
and if there
quiet.
is music,
Yeah.
it's usually not metal
Yeah.
at all.
Yeah. It's the
I
opposite.
mean,
It's like jazz or something, right? Something nice and
yeah, and it's
mellow.
it's like it obviously like when you grow older, I think the taste gets a little bit broader or whatever. I mean,
Yeah. You know,
being from Austria, being from Salzburg, it has the classical component as well that you can't get around and that you hate as a kid and
yeah.
whatnot. And nowadays, I'm actually enjoying orchestra stuff or whatever as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
So it's
You know,
it's
at the same time, like for me, anyways, I've always had a pretty wide musical taste. You know, like I
mm,
was kind of a metalhead, and you'd walk into my music store, and I was listening to Michael Jackson in the '80s. You know,
yeah,
when
yeah,
the Bad album came out, because of the production quality of it, I was just blown away. I was blown away by the production and some of the sounds that
yeah,
were coming out of it, and you know,
yeah.
so it wasn't
I
so
was
much.
about to say, I back in those early days, I used to listen to a bunch of pop albums
Yeah.
that just for the production
Yeah, exactly.
value.
Exactly. Well, it was the same
I
reason
still,
I liked a lot of the '80s bands when they came out. You know, like
yeah,
Def Leppard and Winger, who everyone hated, but I loved because they were just so well produced. You know, and
absolutely, yeah.
some of those
A
producers
lot
back
of the
then were
a
just
lot
so
of the
good.
metal, especially nowadays, I think is completely like over the top. Like sounds are completely, you know, not you can't reproduce half of it
Yeah.
live. It's just it
Really.
runs through chains and chains of fucking plugins and whatnot. It's like,
Really.
why are you doing this? This is not,
Yeah.
this is not necessary.
Yeah.
Um,
But
it's
do metal bands play to tracks?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I know very few bands that don't have tracks, to be
Yeah.
honest.
Huh.
At, at least not like the occasional keyboard track or
Yeah.
whatever. It's
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it's funny
Some use it
because
more than others, but
it's
you know,
so common now, and I'm always surprised when I find out about it because I'm like, really? Like those guys who I've always liked so much, they're playing to tracks. And
yeah,
like you said, sometimes it's just a keyboard track, sometimes it's maybe some background vocals or something,
yeah,
um
yeah, yeah,
but when it's more than that, like when you hear that, on Motley Crue's stadium tour, Nikki Sixx wasn't playing the bass, it was a bass track, and things like
yeah,
that.
yeah,
That's disturbing, that's a bit disturbing.
yeah. But that's also not very metal specific. That happens
No, of
everywhere.
course not. Yeah, of
And
course not.
I actually think it happens in pop way more than it does in,
Oh, 100%.
you know,
Most of them don't sing at all,
yeah,
or
yeah,
most of the
yeah,
instruments aren't even real.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. But back to this genre, which I'm obviously intrigued with because I don't know that much about it. And by the way, like, so you said as we grow older we change our taste and stuff. So one of the earliest metal concerts I went to was Judas Priest, probably in, like, I don't know, 1980 or something.
yeah.
And I'm listening like crazy to the new Judas Priest album right now. It's so good. Rob Halford
Okay.
is 74
Yeah,
years
yeah,
old
yeah,
or something, and his voice is incredible on this album. Like, he's hitting the
yeah.
notes that he hit when he was in his 20s. It's crazy. And but anyways, back to the genre. So, are there any gear, like things that are uncommon maybe in other types of music? Like, do you have to use different equipment for this type of music, or is it pretty much all the
No,
same?
no, I wouldn't. I wouldn't say. I wouldn't say different equipment at all. I mean, a
Yeah.
lot of people nowadays go to the digital amp thing, like be it Kempo or XFX or a neural DSP,
Yeah.
whatever it is that that's your preference.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily agree with that trend because it's not the same yet. I don't
Yeah.
even. I'm not sure it will even get to the point where it's the same
Yeah.
that to a real like tube amp. Maybe in for the next generation, but not in my lifetime. I don't see that on the horizon
Yeah.
anywhere.
Yeah.
So I mean, yeah, I don't think but I mean, what we do different, or we started doing different, and now a lot of people are doing it, is that we use isolation cabs for guitars and bass,
Really?
which yeah, for a long time.
Huh.
I know that like arena bands or bigger bands have done that for a very long time as well. Like Metallica, I think, were one of the first ones that did that. But I don't remember really any of the smaller bands or like the bands that were in Flames' size that did that when we started doing it.
And
It
can you
was
explain
basically
what
when
that
they
is for people who don't understand?
yeah, it's a very simple concept
Yeah.
actually. It's basically just it used to be just a case where you put the guitar speaker in and then you mic it in the case, you close the case so you can lower your stage volume, and therefore you have more control over the actual guitar tone
Yeah.
and the like how loud your stage is.
Yeah.
And we started using it shortly after the guys decided that they want to use in-ears,
Yeah.
like in-ear monitors, and then that made the most sense to do that. And the ones that we are using now is like a purpose built that is basically speaker cabinet and case in one unit.
Yeah.
It just has like three connectors in the back, two for the mic, one for the actual speaker, and then that's it. It's got one like 12-inch speaker in it, and that's it.
Yeah.
And I mean, that drastically improves the quality, especially on smaller shows, for instance, because the stage gets so much more quiet that you can actually, on front of house, actually mix. And on bigger shows, it's much better also, because like if you listen, I record all the shows on multi-track.
Yeah.
And if you listen to the guitar, that's it. There's only guitar. There's no bleed from the drums. There's nothing else. There's no like.
Are you also isolating
fill,
drums
whatever.
though?
No. I mean, the only noise that's on stage literally is the acoustic drum kit.
Yeah.
And a little bit of side fill, which also has mainly drums or whatever. There's nothing else that's going on stage. We still have guitar cabs, so when they need to do like some feedbacks or whatever, they can do that. But they're obviously on a way lower level than what you would have them if this would be your main source for the mic.
Yeah.
So
well,
I really think that makes a big difference. And a lot of other bands started to adapt that after a while.
Well, you said something that I think is key, which it just gives you more control, because if everybody's just, got everything turned up to 10 and it's just a bunch of noise on stage, obviously it makes your job more difficult, especially for the first 5 or 6 rows, in front of the stage where they're hearing sound off the stage, not out of your.
But it's like, for me, this is also, it's always been like that. I'm a big fan of dB limits. I always was, as long as they're implemented in a like sensible way.
Yeah.
Because like when I started, it was already like Switzerland had them as long as I can think. Ever since I've been to Switzerland for the first time.
How many decibels? What's their limit?
It's, I believe it's 90 average over a certain period of time.
From the toilets?
unless you provide free hearing protection, then you can go to 99 or 100.
Wow. That's
and nowadays, I don't know the exact law, but it seems to be like pretty much like 100 over like 15 minutes or half an hour, which is more than enough.
Yeah. But it's quite low compared to what I'm used to when I grew up, with the walls of speakers,
Yeah. I mean, that whole technology just completely, that changed so much in the last 15, 20 years.
Well, especially because of line array and stuff, right? Like it's a much more scientific approach.
Because of line array, obviously, also it got way more precise even once the line arrays were already there. Now the new thing basically is like beam steering or like cardioid systems that only really throw in one direction, where again you just don't have any spill back on stage. You don't have that much like secondary noise, so to speak, and it just gets everything else. It cleans it up really nice.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that technology. So speakers are just very narrow.
They started this in the with the sub speakers, because obviously the lower the frequency gets, the more of a circle the dispersion is, so to speak. And so cardioid subarrays were like the first step in that development, basically. And then this German company DMB actually released a system that would do the same thing, but not only for the sub frequencies. It does it over basically the whole bandwidth. you know, so all this like muddy everything below 300-400 whatever, everything that, you know, just basically makes it difficult or makes it more difficult in arenas and stuff, is basically gone or improves drastically. And that combined with a very precise software to calculate where you need your speakers to hit, just makes an overall difference. You know, it's this little pieces, like the isolation cabs is just one of them. And then this speaker technology and this and this and this and this, that just makes it a completely different, like if you want it to be, and if the artist or the musicians actually want this to be the best it can be, there's a lot of technology that you can utilize
it's
these
very
days that hasn't been there like 5-10 years ago. It's crazy.
It's very, very interesting because, like I said earlier, nuance to mayhem or whatever, but it's adding precision, you know, to mayhem. So, you know, what's being played might be very confusing and noisy and everything else, but then you start to really kind of tighten everything up, first of all, with isolating sounds on stage, but then, you know, the system itself being able to do even more of that and a much more direct approach.
And I mean, it was for me, this was very funny because once we switched to this new PA technology on one tour, it was actually the tour in 2017 with Sarah. This is we had a pre-release system out. It wasn't really a beta test, but it was almost finished, but it wasn't released yet.
From D&B?
Yes, exactly. It's called GSL.
Okay.
And they actually gave us an arena system. They sent one of their guys out with it to help out with like our systems engineer to like set it up and straighten it out. And it was basically, for them, it was like a field test. Like, we know it's, you know, the product's ready, but how does it do? What's the little things that we still need to tweak a little bit, you know, being like how quick you can rig it, or like small adjustments in the software that controls it and stuff like that. And on those first shows, I remember that it like, for me, it was like, oh my God, I actually have to clean up my mix. I can hear things now that I couldn't hear systems. It's like, it actually, in the end, more work for me because it was just like, okay, what is this? You know, and I had like doubts in the beginning. It's like, well, this is what you have been doing for the last 15 years. But it also made it better and you know, made the mix better. And it's funny now because obviously you don't have that same exact system everywhere you go. So now, even though they, thank God, are quite common nowadays, especially on outdoor festivals and stuff. But you sometimes go back to like a not so advanced system or an older system, and even those mixes are sounding better now because what you're sending out of the console is already way more precise. Because you can hear it on this, you know, it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. Like, for me, this was a very, very interesting process over this tour and like the tours after. Because I like realized, okay, there's a lot of, I can do a lot more work here and in this part and on that part, where I would have said a couple of months earlier, no, this, you know, this is going to be as good as it gets. There's there's nothing more to gain here. So, you know, it's I like it because it also means that it doesn't make the job boring, so to speak, you know, because you're always aiming and trying to find something to make it a little bit better.
So you started early enough to where you obviously started on analog consoles, and so what was that transition like for you, and when did it happen?
I know the exact time when it happened. refused for a very long time to change, because every single time I had a digital console in my hands, before that was just like, what is this? What this does not. It feels like a toy. It sounds like a toy. This is not what I want. And then we were on Gigantour with Megadeth in the US.
And Dream Theater. I saw that.
No, it wasn't Dream Theater.
Oh, I didn't know they did more than one Gigantour.
Oh, yeah.
This one was like Lamb of God and Megadeth and
exactly.
Dream Theater.
We were on the one with Lamb of God.
This is the same one. Dream Theater was on it.
No.
Huh.
But we didn't tour. We didn't tour with Dream Theater.
Huh. Oh. Interesting. Maybe they just did
whatever
part of it or something. Yeah.
It was. It must have been early-ish 2000s as well.
Yeah.
2005, 2006, something like that.
Yeah, I saw it in Orlando at the Hard Rock Live in Orlando. I'm a big Dream Theater fan. Progressive prog rock.
Dream Theater? I don't know. I don't think it was Dream Theater.
Yeah.
I would remember Dream Theater.
Well, I only went for Dream Theater. Lamb of God, and If It Was Your Band, and some of the other ones were like, oh my God, what am I listening to right now?
It was definitely High on Fire. I think Children of Bodom. I don't remember.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. At that time, though, the guy who did front of house for Megadeth was a friend of mine, and he actually called me or emailed me before the tour, and he basically was like, "Okay, we have two choices. It's like either I can take a Midas Heritage for me, which is an analog console, and all the supports are gonna get like a cheap Yamaha, whatever the Yamaha of the day was back then, or we can all agree on taking a DigiDesign D-Show console and share that between all of us." And I'm like, well, if you ask me like that, then I would prefer the DigiDesign, because I know that at least like one of the most decent digital consoles at that time. And then 3 weeks later or whatever, the tour started, and we had like a production day somewhere in the US, and that was the first time I started mixing on a digital console.
You just jumped
like
right
on
into
a tour,
the deep end, right?
basically.
Straight into the deep end.
Yeah. And then, I mean, that was it's really funny, because we're still using, like, DigiDesign became Avid. And Avid had like a bunch of different consoles, and now the latest they released the S6 or S6L platform. We switched to that I don't know, 5 years ago or something like that. I don't know.
So you've always stayed with the same brand?
Yeah, because it's like all the integration with all the, like, we're using very heavy snapshots, for instance, which is a little bit uncommon for like a metal band or whatever, and the integration with Pro Tools and the recording and virtual sound check, where you can just play back stuff through the PA, be it for yourself to work on something, or if a musician wants to hear something, or it's all very, very easy. And in the beginning, Avid or DigiDesign back then were really the only guys where this was doable. Now you can do it with a lot more consoles, obviously, and also with a lot cheaper consoles. Technology here as well evolved like crazy, basically, But for me, this was one of like the key moments, because like when I was still with Analog Gear, I remember I would like write myself cue cards for each song, which is basically like an analog form of snapshots, where I would note down like delay times or reverb types and shit like that. And it's like back then I would mid song, I would already start thinking about what I need to do break between the two songs to make, to set up for the next one. And it takes away a lot of concentration, obviously.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things that you don't really realize. But once you have a tool like the snapshot thing where you can store stuff, you finally realize it's like, oh, actually, now I don't need to think about this anymore, and it
Yeah.
frees up my head and my time to actually do what the band is paying me for, which is mix a show.
Yeah.
So on that tour, like halfway through, it was a pretty long tour. It was almost 2 months, I think. And halfway through, I started getting into snapshots and stuff and try out this technology. And then I actually immediately started to like it because I saw the potential. It wasn't necessarily there sound-wise yet, but now I think it's very close.
Like there's not
Let's put it
still
that
a
way.
warmth that you get from analog consoles that's better or whatever.
Yeah, it is. But I mean, I would still take out an analog console if we would only do arenas and money was no object. And it's
Yeah.
like if I could choose, I would maybe try it out. It would always be with like a digital sidecar
Yeah.
that does all the automation stuff.
Yeah.
Because at this point, there's so much automation going on during the show that is also these little details that I would just miss because you can't physically do it on an analog console
Yeah.
with like unless you have like three people pushing buttons or whatever.
Yeah.
So this is for me like an overall package thing where I think, okay, the advantages of the digital world definitely outweigh taking an analog console.
Yeah.
Whereas coming back to guitar amps, that's not there yet because especially when we do like headline tours or it's not fly shows where it matters if you take like a Marshall head or a tiny little digital box. It makes no difference to me, and then I would always choose the analog amp.
Yeah.
But I mean, we just did Australia and Asia, for instance, where we had to fly almost every second day. And we take neural DSP gear there as well,
Yeah.
because obviously the advantage of moving around so much outweighs carrying a tube amp that possibly gets broken by the airline. So you have to
interesting.
pick your battles, so to speak.
Yeah.
But
so you think guitar amplifiers are getting close to a point where nobody will be using tube amplifiers anymore, and all the modeling amplifiers and stuff are going to take over? No?
I think it's like vinyl. There will be a big...
Yeah.
I don't think it will go away completely, just like vinyl never did. There was always this freaks somewhere that would keep building their record collection. And I mean, now you can
it's
see
funny because I
have
a house up in Canada in the mountains, and one of my plans because I spend the warm months there from May until September, October or whatever. And one of my plans this year is to buy a turntable and a bunch of vinyl to start collecting back. I got rid of all my vinyl, I don't know, 30 years ago or something. And now I'm going to start collecting it again at like 20 times the price or whatever, right? Like,
probably, yeah.
More than 20
no,
times.
I don't think this will go away at all.
So aside from like, you've had two major shifts in technology, I think in audio, obviously line array and digital consoles. Has there been like mic technology or other things? Power, obviously digital power has changed some things, but has there been any other like revolutionary changes?
That's the two major
it's pretty big
things. Like digital consoles definitely being like, I would say that's even bigger than the line array technology. And then line array probably the second one. But I mean, other than that, it's very
Well, digital consoles is such a big topic too, because, you know, Dante and all of the plugins and that whole universe,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
it's
yeah,
not just
yeah.
the control surface itself, it's all of the
Yeah.
other stuff that came with it, right?
I mean, yeah, and that actually, I would, if you would separate that a little bit, that part from the console, like the DSP
Right.
power, processing power is maybe the third one,
Yeah.
because that's obviously not only a thing in consoles, but it's also in like reverb units, or even the guitar processing
Right.
stuff, the
Yeah.
modeling amps and blah blah blah, that would have not been possible um, without having this ginormous amount of processing power basically in your hand. I mean, you also experienced the birth of cell phones, and
Hmm.
how this looked in the beginning, and like the basically first laptops, and how laptops look now.
Of course.
That's
Yeah.
like, I was also in the middle of all this when I grew up, and this is
Yeah.
like, what used to be a suitcase sized thing is now basically in your hand,
Yeah.
and even more than
Yeah.
that. So it's
Well,
it's crazy.
they always compare like the iPhone, the power of an iPhone to like the original space shuttle. This
Ah,
has
yeah.
more computing
Yeah,
power than the original space shuttle,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Which is
yeah,
incredible, you
yeah,
know?
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so what was I going to ask you? Oh, so you use DMB, I guess, pretty much exclusively if you can.
If I can, of
Yeah.
course. No, it's,
So,
I have a very good relationship with them, because that's basically what I grew up on,
of
like
course, yeah.
on their PAs, like from 20 years ago. That the club I started to work in here in Salzburg just had a DMB install, and
Uh,
that's when I had my first contact. So I know a lot of people there, and
yeah.
yeah, it's
Plus
always, I
proximity, I
always
guess.
like it to yeah, semi close proximity, and it's like they they like me for some reason, and they
Uh-huh.
always, I can give feedback on certain things,
That's
and
cool.
it's always nice to do things like
Yeah.
that.
S-
You
Um,
know.
you know, I'm old enough. I started in the industry on the lighting side, and I came into lighting right when automated lighting was becoming a thing. And so
Yeah,
the whole transition from you know, fixed park hands and things. So, you know, when I started, most shows were still mostly park hands. Occasionally you
yeah,
had somebody who had some Verilights, but that was it, right? And
yeah,
then the companies I was working with were creating alternatives to the Verilights. And so I just saw something similar. I remember when I saw my first moving light, and I was like, whoa, you know, nobody's ever going to use a fixed position light again. Why would you? You know, when you can
yeah,
move it
yeah,
and change
yeah.
color, why would you use a light that just does one thing? I recently, so I'm from Calgary, Canada.
Hmm.
And last summer when I was there, my house is just outside of Calgary in the mountains. And when I was there last summer, I was invited to PK Sound to see their
Ah, yeah.
system. And
Hmm.
I didn't really know what I was walking into, right? And I went into their showroom and they said, you know, here's a typical setup for an installation. And but let's say there's suddenly a 12-foot wide column right in front of your you know your speakers, and you know you're missing sound to a big part of the venue or whatever, and the rig started moving, and I was like, what
Hmm.
the hell is going on here? And they showed it to me on the screen what was happening and the all the science behind it, and I was just blown away. And I remember feeling the same thing, like, why would anyone want a rig that you can't adjust in the air once you see this technology, you know?
Yeah,
And but I think, you know, the challenge to that is obviously that it's kind of like Betamax, where everybody knew Betamax was better, but because it was only available from Sony in that one device, it didn't make much sense. Where VHS, you could get it anywhere, right? And so that
yeah,
might become a problem where people don't want to change brands just to get that feature. I don't know. Do you have any
yeah,
thoughts about?
yeah. I it's funny because like Daryl is on me all the time as well when we're in Canada to come and
Oh,
see one of their systems.
yeah,
Um, so I mean, I heard of it,
yeah,
and I know that it's like self-adjusting, so to speak.
yeah,
Um, but I don't know. There's a lot of nothing that it does that you can't really do with something else either. Other than like, I can't think of a situation where I'm like setting it up in the morning and then all of a sudden I have the urge or the need to move it again.
yeah,
So that's where I see the issue with that, and then it's very heavy as far as I know.
yeah,
Obviously because there's motors in it
yeah,
and
yeah,
stuff.
built into the
And I
boxes. Yeah,
mean, EAW tried something similar, if I remember correctly, with the
yeah.
Anya a couple of years back. Um, and
I just find it intriguing,
that
like to me, when I
I
saw it,
it's
I was
definitely
like,
I
wow,
mean,
you know?
it's an interesting idea,
Yeah,
that's for sure. I'm not sure how practical it is, like in a real world,
yeah,
doing 300 shows a year type of situation.
yeah,
But who knows?
yeah.
It's like
Interesting.
I for me this is always very like I got asked a couple of times, like in Frankfurt or whatever, on the Pro Light and Sound. It's like, where do you think a certain technology is going or whatever? It's like, I don't know. It's like I just use it. It's like
Did
I
you go to
can't.
the show this year?
No.
No.
The Pro Light and Sound has been dead for a couple of years now.
Since it
I
split
think
with Mesa, right?
it, yeah. Was it a complete? I don't remember how that happened.
Well, Mesa
I just
canceled and
heard.
hasn't come back. So,
Oh, it hasn't. Oh, that's true. It hasn't come
yeah,
back at
it
all.
hasn't come
That's
back
yeah.
because it used to be
Yeah.
such a huge show. Like I used to go to Music Mesa
Yeah.
and Pro Light every
Yeah.
year,
Crazy.
and it was just such a massive show. You had to take the bus to get from, the sound pavilion to the lighting
Yeah.
pavilion or whatever, right?
Hold on one
But
second.
now it's much smaller. Yeah. So, you gave us back a funny statement when she asked you, you know, just funny stories of being on the road for 25 years with this band and, being
Yeah.
their babysitter. And, I mean, that's so typical. Rock bands in particular, I think worse than pop artists. Like pop artists, I think have sort of, there's a list of things that every pop artist is going to do wrong or whatever, but rock bands are looking for trouble. Like rock bands started the whole thing of throwing televisions out hotel windows and flipping cars over. And, I remember one time we took furniture out of all the hotel rooms and we furnished the elevators. And we were like
Okay.
betting on who could furnish the elevator better. Like there were 6 elevators or whatever, and we furnished the elevators with plants and televisions and couches and everything, right? It's just stupid things you do when you're bored,
Yeah.
But you mentioned one story in particular about running around South America with lots of cash. And it's
Yeah.
funny because when I was early with Martin Lighting, I remember we had a guy who was relatively new with us. Now he works for Robe Lighting, but he was new
Hmm.
with us at the time. And he had to go with one of our salespeople down to, he was a guy who did the demos, like he controlled the lights and stuff during demos. And he had to go to South America to show off some new technology in a few different countries. And the first country they went to, it was him and one of our salespeople. First country they went to paid us like 60,000 in cash or something to pay off something on their account. And
Yeah.
he was so nervous because he was traveling all over South America with this $60,000 in cash in his suitcase, and he had to keep
Yeah.
checking that box saying I don't have more than 10,000 in cash or whatever.
Yeah.
And he was so nervous. So your statement reminded me of that.
Yeah. I mean, thank God those days are basically over.
Yeah.
And to me, it was always very bizarre anyway, because it's like, I mean, in South America, okay, that's one thing. Like, especially in the earlier days, it was pretty much like a Wild West
Yeah.
type of situation, and you knew that.
Yeah.
But even in the US, there was so many things that were handled cash, where I'm like, what do you want me to do with this? This is
Yeah.
like, why just wire it? Oh,
Yeah.
what do you mean? And this is like literally just like 15 years ago, where
It's crazy.
it was either cash or it was a check.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm European. I have never seen a check in my life.
It's
You know what I
crazy.
mean? I have a
Yeah.
bank account and a card, and
Yeah.
you can wire to this bank account. This is how it works.
Yeah.
Like, how are you not? This
It's
was
true.
very bizarre for me.
Yeah.
But on this was one of the first, like the note that I wrote. This was one of the first South American runs I did, and it just kept piling on. And I had like this little like Toomey weekender bag basically, and by the end of the run, it wasn't even that long. It was like 10 days or 2 weeks or something. It was literally, it was filled to the top with fucking US dollars,
Oh my
and
God.
it was not a comfortable
No.
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 And I mean,
That's
I
no
would
fun.
definitely, I wouldn't do something like that nowadays. I would just refuse. It's like, yeah,
Yeah.
it's not. You talk to the agent and you figure it out how we get the money. I don't care. You
But
know,
it's
it's
funny because until very recently, like I talked to a lot of tour managers and stuff, and until very recently, settlements were done in cash. And
oh, it's not like they're gone. We just did South America in November, December last year, and there was a bunch of them that were like, "Oh yeah, we couldn't get to the bank to wire it in time, so we're gonna pay you the balance in cash." No, you're not. I'm
oh
not
my
picking up
God.
fucking 50 grand or whatever.
No.
You know, it's like, are
Yeah.
you insane? It's
Yeah.
like, I have 3 weeks to go. I'm going to like in Colombia, and you know, I have no intention to carry
No.
that amount of money. You
No.
know, this is
Well, and
like,
I mean
this
the
is
same,
insane.
by the way, the same person at the venue who did that settlement for 50,000 in cash, he's calling up his brother and saying, "Hey, they're driving a
Exactly. Yeah, yeah,
white
yeah, yeah,
van.
yeah.
They're going from here to
Exactly.
Bolivia
Yeah,
and they're going to cross this
yeah,
road right here, you know, and then
yeah,
your car is getting attacked by a bunch of guys jumping out of the jungle or something and you
yeah,
lose the money,
yeah, yeah.
right? So, yeah, I
I
mean,
mean,
I wouldn't put it past them.
it was pretty dumb, so to speak, to do it back in the day. But it
Yeah.
was also, I mean, it was also obviously way different sums
Of course.
we were
Yeah.
talking. And I just think in general, it changed. Like back then, it was more like, you know, if you could take uh, if you have worked with certain promoters a couple of times, you could take their word for it, and
Hmm.
you know, it was kind of, it had this type of quality which was nice.
Yeah.
And nowadays it's either
It's all business.
super corporate
Yeah.
or it's super shady. There's
Really.
nothing in between anymore. You know, I'm lucky to be on the super corporate type
Yeah.
or side of things, where I don't have to worry about these type of situations
Yeah.
most of the time.
Yeah.
Um,
The
but yeah,
the
it's
big the
yeah.
big pop the big pop and country tours and stuff. You know, I refer to this article all the time, but I read an article from Rapino from Live Nation, and he says that the the reason that tours just keep growing and growing and growing and ticket sales are so crazy and all of this stuff is because of social media followings. You know, these artists might have
Mhm.
10 million followers on social media. And he said, my job's easy. All I got to do is sell tickets to 5% of them. And,
Yeah.
but in the metal genre, I would think that it's not so much like that. Like, or is it also driven by social media and,
I think it got a lot more important, um, maybe later than in other genres, but by now you can definitely tell that there is some bands that do really well, partly because of how they deal with their social media,
Right.
and
Yeah.
how well they actually play it. You know, there's I can't think of anybody right now, but there's definitely a few out there that wouldn't be as big as they are if
Yeah.
it wouldn't be partly because of social media. But
Yeah.
then again, I mean, you know, people are not stupid either. Audiences are not stupid. Nowadays, if you don't deliver a certain quality of show, they go once and that's it. And then that doesn't really help anyone either, because sooner or later you're going to run out of people to sell tickets to,
Yeah.
you know.
Exactly. Exactly.
But it's a very bizarre time now, post COVID, so to speak, anyway, because there's all this, you know, you hear it everywhere. The cost of living just exploded. People don't have any money anymore. Everything is so expensive, especially over here in Europe with
Yeah.
like electricity and gas and whatnot, with
Brutal.
the war in Ukraine and all this bullshit going on. But on the other hand, like whatever, Taylor Swift or Coldplay, who play like 10 shows in the same city, you know, for ticket prices that are like way higher
Ridiculous.
than
Yeah.
probably any metal tour ever.
Yeah.
And at the same time, like what we've seen, or what I've seen with a bunch of bands, is merch sales are crazy after COVID. You know,
It's
when
wild,
we
isn't it?
when we went to certain cities where we would do, I don't know, $5 a head, it's 10 now, and
Yeah.
it's like, how is that possible? Like, I don't get it.
And they'll
It's
buy
like
anything. You
this
know,
doesn't really go together with what, you know, you read everywhere, that
you
like
know,
people don't have any money. It's like, okay, obviously they do have money, they just spend it way differently than what they did like 3 years ago.
I was talking recently with someone in the confetti business, and they said like after a show, like a Taylor Swift show or something, people are on eBay selling pieces of confetti for like $20 or €20 or whatever, right?
Crazy.
For a little tiny bag of pieces of confetti that were blown off in the show 2 nights earlier or something. It's shocking to me. It's
Yeah,
shocking to
that's
me.
crazy.
And that's
But
probably
what's even
the
more
people who are
shocking is,
sweeping up the stadium floor or whatever, you know, it's probably those people who got smart and said, I'm going to sell this shit on eBay. And they're filling their pockets
yeah.
and bags with confetti and stuff, right?
But more crazy to me than selling it is actually that there's people out there who actually will buy that. That is something that I
It's
completely
unbelievable.
do not understand.
Well,
It's like,
remember, people
what,
will pay $1
what's,
million for like what was
yeah.
it, a grilled cheese sandwich or whatever, because it looked like
Oh,
Jesus. I forget the story,
yeah,
but
yeah,
you know, people will pay.
yeah,
There's so much money out there right now that seems to, a lot of it is in the hands of really stupid people who will spend any amount of money to buy things. And,
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
like
That's true. Yeah,
I'm a big fan of classic cars, classic sports cars, Camaros, and you know, all kinds of them, Cutlass and all of the beautiful cars from the 60s and stuff,
yeah,
Corvettes. And the pricing now is so insane, you know, it's
yeah, yeah,
just completely insane. I don't know. There's a lot of money out there, you know,
yeah, yeah.
and
I mean, it has to be. It's
yeah.
yeah. I can't really
Does most of your,
understand.
work come from touring or festivals? I know festivals, especially in metal, festivals are huge in Europe still, right? But
Yeah, I mean, they're huge. There's huge festivals everywhere. I
yeah,
would say. I mean, the Europeans obviously invented the like 3 day type of
yeah,
camping, blah blah blah. That, to my knowledge, at least, that didn't exist in the U.S. before Coachella,
yeah,
and it doesn't really exist other than with Coachella either.
yeah,
You know. Um, but it's, yeah, usually like there's always that there's always a good amount of festivals
yeah,
on every cycle.
yeah,
You usually do like on an album cycle, you might do 2 to 3 summers of festivals, you
Yeah.
know, the big important ones in the first year when the album came out, and then like the secondary ones that you couldn't do because of date clashes or whatever.
Yeah.
You do the second year, and then you go to the obscure ones, so to speak, like that are in the wilder countries
Yeah.
in the third year. So it's a lot, but it's also very compressed in time. So
Yeah.
it,
But I remember somebody recently in the Netherlands was telling me, you know, touring's not so big in the Netherlands. And I said, oh, that's too bad. So you don't get to see much live music. And he said, no, there are, I forget the number. I think it was 1,500 festivals in the Netherlands.
oh, that's they have
I'm just
huge
like,
festivals.
what? You know, it's a
Yeah,
small country
yeah,
of what, 5 million
yeah,
people or something. I don't even remember,
yeah,
but you
yeah.
know, 1,500
Holland,
festivals.
Netherlands, and Belgium is special because it's very, they pump a lot of government money into the entertainment industry.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, one of the best European festivals, in my opinion, for the metal genre is definitely Kaspop
Yeah.
in Belgium, because everything is just perfect. The whole infrastructure with the way that backstage is set up. It's, even if the weather is not good, you're not in the mud. It's not, you know, you have like proper facilities with like showers and bathrooms, and it's all really, really nice and really well done.
Yeah.
And that's very unique to like Belgium and Netherlands. Like all the smaller, there's a lot of smallish clubs in the Netherlands that
Yeah.
like between 1,000 to like 1,500, 3,000 people or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and they're all like purpose built venues, you know, with the little details that are important. A lot of dressing rooms, you know, a big enough freight elevator or whatever.
Hmm.
Most of the time, what they do is they build buildings where they have like 3 capacity sizes in the same building.
Wow.
So, you know, you can be a
Did you?
band that's on the verge and you get booked into 500 capacity, and all of a
Yeah.
sudden, oh no, let's move it
We
into
made it to
1,500,
the big
and
room. Yeah.
stuff like that. But it all makes a lot of sense, and you can
Yeah.
you can tell that there's a lot of government money spent, because obviously some people in the government value that this is actually important to people.
Well,
And
and
I mean,
they're making tax dollars
art
off of it
and
too.
live entertainment, whatever genre it might be, is important to the people.
Yeah.
You know, it's important for mental health, as we have seen a couple of years ago, that
Yeah.
it's not
Yeah. No
good if
kidding.
everything just stops.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's like I don't. To me, it's very bizarre that this is so spotty, so to speak. Where why is there not more money spent on all this? Could be all a much nicer experience for everyone. You know,
Yeah.
for the people working the industry,
I agree.
for the people who go to the shows. It's not rocket science, you know,
Yeah.
and it's obviously still big business.
Yeah.
Like there's good money to be made.
Of course.
So
Yeah.
it's
When did you get
yeah.
back to work after COVID? Speaking of COVID.
We did our first tour in 2022.
Okay. Yeah. So
February 22.
you had pretty much 2 full years off then.
I had almost exactly 2 years off. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was, for us, it was very bizarre, because we were gonna do Australia and Asia, um, and then quite late in the game, they booked 2 shows in Russia right before that. So our last show before COVID hit was St. Petersburg, and then we flew to Auckland in New Zealand,
Oh.
just to basically meet at the lobby of the hotel
And then turn around.
And get back in the well, we slept one night, and then we flew back home the next day.
Long ass flight to do an overnight,
Which
stay.
which was bizarre. And then I remember I got back home on the I arrived in Auckland on a Friday Saturday morning. I flew back home on Sunday, and I arrived at 5 or 6 in the morning in Vienna on the first day of our first lockdown. And it was just bizarre when I got out of the plane. Out of the plane, there was like 3 people at the airport, and then I took there's like a 2.5-hour train ride from Vienna to Salzburg. Again, I think I was the only one on the train.
Oh my God.
And it was like somebody wiped out all the people.
Yeah, it was like a bad sci-fi movie.
It was crazy.
Yeah.
Absolutely crazy, And I mean, now obviously it's especially crazy with thinking that like playing shows in Russia is, I mean, it's not going to happen again in my lifetime. I don't know.
You don't think so?
I'm 100% sure that we're not going to go back. This is not happening.
Huh.
This is going to take way, way too long to reestablish.
Sort it out. Yeah.
If it's even going to happen. I mean, we'll see what...
I don't know.
What happens with the orange one in September, and then how that plays out in terms of Ukraine and Russia, and maybe we have bigger issues come January anyway. But I don't see any real touring going back there anytime soon.
No. It's interesting because I think as a world, we have a short memory. And, remember all the changes that we were going to make during COVID. Oh, we'll never do this again. And we're going to do it like this in the future. And now we're going to change all of these things. And it's going to be much safer and much better. And we're going to treat our people better and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Bullshit.
Yeah.
Bullshit.
Yeah.
Here we are a few years later, and we're worse than we were in 2019 in most ways.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So
I agree. It's crazy.
Yeah. Sarah put a question in here that said, are there any frameworks, methods, or processes that you found to be especially useful in your work that others may find useful too? And you gave us an answer, but do you remember what you answered?
I think it was the thing that what originally drew me to the audio side of things. Which is the fact that you can basically try anything. There is obviously certain physical rules that apply, just like with a lot of other or most other jobs as well. But I mean, one thing specifically would be that if you have 2 mics on the snare drum, that you always have to turn the bottom one in phase, so it's as a whole, it's in phase again. And that's one of that's the rule. You have to do it. No, you don't. You don't have to do it because yes, it makes sense. And on paper and, if you calculate it, it's probably right that you have to do it, but you might actually get the result that you are looking for with not doing it.
Yeah.
As an example, it's like what I like about it is doing stuff differently, just to try it, not for the sake of it, but try it out. There's nothing, it's not going to hurt anyone, it's not going to destroy anything. But where are you getting with this when you try things out? And I think that's a very interesting thing to do in general. Like I still to this day, after more than 20 years, just wipe out all my EQs, for instance, on a show file, and like redo it, or do it with a different plugin, or do it completely.
That's interesting.
Try out things that I've never tried before. And with some things, it's definitely don't never change a running system. Like you shouldn't, this has been tried and tested for 30 years.
Yeah.
Let's keep it like this because it's fine. But on other things, it's like, oh, this is crazy.
Yeah.
You know, this is actually awesome how good that works. And different artists or different genres require different solutions and stuff. So it's like it's one way of like keeping myself on my toes, so to speak, a little bit.
Yeah.
To keep like learning more or new things.
Yeah.
That, you know,
No, that's
sometimes cool. I'm like, okay, I try something, it doesn't work for what I'm trying to do, and then years later I'm doing something completely else, and I remember, oh, I tried this once, and I do it in this different application.
That's
And it's
perfect.
like, oh, this is great.
Yeah.
You know, and this is what it should be in my opinion, or this is why I like my job as much as I do.
I like that concept, because I think you have to challenge, you know, the norm or challenge the rules or break the rules. You have to break things in order to figure out how to make them better sometimes, right? And
yeah, absolutely.
I always use racing examples because my son is a racing driver, but he grew up in go-karts, and when he first started karting and he was frustrated that he wasn't getting faster and stuff, one of the things we did is I would pay him $5 every time he went off at a corner and hit the barrier. I would pay him to hit the barrier. And the reason I was doing this was because he was forcing himself to carry more speed through those corners. And when he found the limit, you'd have to go over the limit to find the limit, right? So he'd go over the limit, hit the barrier, and now he knew I just got to lift a tiny bit sooner, or I got to brake a bit sooner, a bit harder, or whatever. Yeah. So he was learning highly valuable lessons that were making him a much better driver. It was only costing me $5, and he didn't get hurt. You know, the barriers were soft, and it wasn't going to hurt him or anything. And it got over the fear of going off track too, you know, because every other driver was lifting really early, braking really hard, etc. So anyways, tell me about, speaking of Russia, there's something here about naked musicians in trains, which sounds like a good name for a metal song, naked musicians in Russian trains, you know?
Yeah.
What's that?
Yeah, that's also a long time ago. We used to take the night train from St. Petersburg to Moscow or the other way.
Yeah.
So it would basically be do a show in the one city, pack up, go to the train station, get on the train at like 1 a.m, and then sleep on the train.
It's such a glamorous life, isn't it? So glamorous.
It was awesome.
I'm joking.
I mean, now it's fine because they have this high speed train now between the two cities, which is only like 3 hours or something, which is a little bit more comfortable.
Yeah.
But there was nothing wrong with it. And it was always like, you know, it was always a party basically. And that's how it is. The naked musicians came.
They just decided
to
take their
basically
clothes off.
Because no, it's like Scandinavian people for some reason to get naked in the most bizarre.
Well, because they're drunk.
Yeah, but not. Sometimes they're sober as well. They just don't.
Oh my God.
This was like something new to me as well in the very beginning. Starting with these guys and also with other Scandinavian bands, it's like they just don't. I don't know. They feel the urge sometimes to do it. I don't know. Maybe it's the Finnish sauna mentality, or
Russia to me seems like the wrong place to do this, though. You know, like
that's where the alcohol comes in.
Yeah. This just seems like the wrong place to do it. Like some big burly Russian is going to come and say "niet." You know?
That happened also. It was a very big Russian lady that came from the what do you call it? Like the restaurant cart. Basically, came back to our thing and was like, "Don't do that again," because somebody dared him to run, like basically all the way through the train and come back.
No,
it was it wasn't only our. It wasn't only our car. It was like he literally went.
Oh my God!
All the way through.
He
made it, and nothing happened, so it's fine. the same guy was chased by Japanese hotel security in Tokyo through the hallways and stuff.
You weren't married at the time, right?
No.
Because I just wonder if that's a story that you call your wife and say, "Oh yeah, did anything happen today, honey?" Well, yeah, we kind of got in trouble for running naked through the train, but yeah.
Oh yeah, I would definitely tell her those stories.
Really?
It's one of
Is she from the industry?
Nothing really ever happened that had like bad consequences.
Yeah.
And there was some really stupid things done back in the day, and even now. I mean, I had musicians arrested for various reasons, and it was always like, okay, slap on the wrist, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
I think as long as you're not a complete idiot, the time when you face like an authority,
yeah,
then you're usually good.
Yeah.
It's like,
that's hilarious.
And then if not, you just go to jail for a night. And
yeah. So I know you've been drinking wine during this recording, and it's morning for me, so I'm jealous. But and you've mentioned that you love champagne.
Yes, yeah, that was actually champagne as well.
Oh, was it?
Just
Day drinking champagne. I like it.
Yes.
But you're also a big coffee guy.
Yes.
Is that because of like the drug in coffee that keeps you awake and makes you buzzed, or is it the flavor and stuff, which is why I like it?
No, yeah, I mean, Austria having a very vast coffee house tradition, that's definitely one thing.
Yeah, I didn't know that about Austria.
And then, Vienna is fucking full of it. And
I didn't know that. I
had
no idea.
The oldest coffee cafes in the world.
Really?
Together.
I didn't know that. I've never been to Austria. I've been to many places, but I've never been to Austria. Yeah, I want to. I always wanted to go because I grew up in Canada skiing, and I always wanted to go to Austria skiing even, but I just never got there.
Yeah.
Never got
No,
there.
I mean, that's definitely a big part of it. And then obviously being very close to Italy and spending lots and lots of childhood family vacations in Italy.
Yeah.
That's another, I think. And it's like, I'm not a nerdy coffee drinker.
Yeah.
Like, searching for and I need to try this new bean and that new bean or whatever. Like I bought myself a espresso machine right at the beginning of when COVID hit.
Yeah.
Because obviously they closed all the cafes.
Right. Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I need to have something at home.
No.
And it was from the beginning that I was just in search of let's call it the perfect espresso.
Yeah.
Like what the port or shipyard worker in Napoli, what they drink as coffee, the €1 at the bar in the morning, just one zip, and that's it. And that's what I basically have. I have like 2-3 different beans that I change up every now and then, but that's it. I mainly
here's
drink
what we're gonna
espresso.
do. Sarah's gonna reach out and get your address, and we're gonna send you. We have a relationship with a local coffee maker here, so it's a guy.
Fantastic.
It's a guy from our industry who took on a passion for coffee, and at some point he bought a small roaster and put it in his garage, and he really learned, and he flew around all over the world learning the best beans and things, and it became such a passion that eventually people started saying, Jamie, your coffee is amazing. Can you make me a bag of it? Can you make me So he was giving it away to all his friends, and then they were saying, well, my buddy wants one. Can I buy one? And so long story short, it became a business called Coffee Cult with K's, like German. And and so
I think I've seen this before.
So I started drinking it just as a customer, and I love dark coffee. So I make like a regular American cup of coffee from a nice espresso machine that is a DeLonghi automatic machine, very easy to use and really nice. And so I drink regular coffee and espresso, but I usually drink like an American tall coffee, you know. And so I would drink the dark one, and my girlfriend was like, "Oh, it's too strong for me." And so I started mixing their medium roast and this particular dark roast, which was called Road Dog, and because he's from our industry. And so it was perfect. And so one time I told him, you know, I mixed these, and he goes, "Well, we should make you a custom blend, and we'll just blend them together in one
Yeah, that's
bag."
awesome.
So we did
Yeah.
that, and we called it Geezer's Grind. And so now it's branded. And
Fantastic.
so the
Yes,
cool thing
please.
is, all of the proceeds from that coffee go to our industry for people who got injured or don't have health insurance or have a problem or mental health, whatever it is. But it goes to a charity to support our industry. And so, anyways, long story short, it's a really good coffee, and we'll have Sarah get your address, and we'll figure out a way to ship a bag of it over
Yeah,
to
oh,
Austria.
excellent.
Yeah,
Thank you. Thank you.
yeah, of course. So, and I share your passion for coffee, but I'm not. You know, I'm Canadian. Our coffee is terrible in Canada. We have this place called Tim
Tim
Hortons.
Hortons.
Yeah, Tim Hortons. I don't know if you know, but he was a very good hockey player, and
No, I didn't.
yeah, he started this chain of coffee shops. He just died a few years ago, I think, actually. But their coffee is terrible, you know, and compared to what you drink and what I drink now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
So yeah.
yeah. I mean,
Well,
nowadays I have to say it's a lot easier to get good and decent coffee.
yeah,
Because in the beginning, in especially in the US, it was difficult. There was
yeah,
there was nothing,
yeah.
and then all of a sudden, okay, Starbucks, which at least it's like, okay, at least it's
It's
consistent.
decent.
It's
Yeah,
not
yeah,
great, but
yeah,
it's not, at least it's not like truck stop coffee.
yeah.
You know,
True.
but nowadays,
But it's
nowadays
seven
with
dollars, which pisses me off. You know, like a cup of
yeah,
coffee is
yeah,
$7. It's so stupid.
yeah, that's one, yeah, it's just
And like you
stupid.
said,
Yeah,
in Italy,
exactly.
you know, you go to a little cafe and it's €1 and it's 10 times
Yeah,
better, you know?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So,
But we actually have within InFlames crew, we have this unofficial coffee club.
oh,
It's the lighting guy, the one of the guitar techs, and me, um, who basically we try to, like, every day on a show day, we try to go out and, like,
find the best coffee.
find a good espresso within the vicinity of the
You
venue.
know, it's
Yeah,
so funny because 30 years ago you would have been looking for a strip club. Now you're looking for a cup of coffee. You know, it's so funny. Yeah, how
yeah,
things
yeah.
have changed, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes.
Thomas, I appreciate you taking the time today to do this with us, and it's been a
Sure.
pleasure getting to know you. And like I said, we'll get you a bag of coffee somehow. And as much as I'm not a massive fan of the music, if I see you popping around Florida at any point, I'll make a point of reaching out and coming to see you.
Absolutely. Please do.
All right, my friend. Thanks so much, and have a great one.
Thank you. You too.